Welcome back to Yarn as a Second Language. This is Chapter 2 of the Unraveled Web, The Origins of Mrs. Peterson, and this one is called The Weaver's Snare. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It does help us out quite a bit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to the story. Adios.
The Unraveled Web, Origins of Mrs. Peterson. Chapter 2, The Weaver's Snare. The rain hadn't stopped since Margaret left the cafe, and by the time she got back to her flat, she was soaked to the bone. Her mind raced. The web wasn't just a secret syndicate. It was a machine, one that could chew her up and spit her out if she made a single wrong move. Victor had left her with more questions than answers, and time wasn't on her side. They were already watching her. She locked her door, checking it twice, then sat down at her workbench. Her hands moved on autopilot, threading yarn through the needle, but her thoughts kept spiraling. How had a simple crochet skill turned into a weapon? How did these people know about her past? Suddenly the lights flickered. Margaret's heart leapt into her throat as the room went pitch black. The thrum of the rain outside was all she could hear until there was a soft click. Someone was in the apartment. Her hand shot to the nearest thing she could find, a pair of scissors. The dark was suffocating, but she could feel them. Footsteps, quiet, steady, moving across the wooden floor. She stood, her back pressed against the wall, gripping the scissors so tightly her knuckles turned white. Whoever was here wasn't just an intruder. They were here for her. A faint glimmer of light broke through the darkness. A small red dot dancing along the floor. A laser sight. Margaret didn't wait. She lunged forward, throwing herself over the couch just as a soft p't of a silenced gunshot cracked through the silence. The bullet embedded into the wall behind her. Adrenaline surged through her. She scrambled behind the coffee table, staying low as she tried to spot her attacker. Another shot whizzed by, and she heard glass shatter. Whoever they were, they weren't amateurs. With a burst of speed, Margaret dashed towards the kitchen, sliding the scissors into her sleeve. She needed to even the playing field. As she rounded the corner, she heard the heavy footsteps closing in behind her. Her heart pounded in her ears. Then she spotted it. A small hand mirror sitting on the counter. She grabbed it, holding it up just as another shot rang out. The laser reflected off the glass, blinding her attacker for a split second. It was all she needed. Margaret flung herself at the intruder. The scissors, hidden in her sleeve, were her only weapon. She slashed blindly, catching her attacker's arm. He let out a grunt of pain, but did not stop. He was trained for this. But so was she. Years of precision with her crochet work had given her speed and agility. She dodged his punches, maneuvering in tight spaces, using the furniture to her advantage. Her attacker pulled back, shaking off the pain, and lunged at her again, this time with a knife. Margaret twisted out of the way, using the sharp edge of the counter as leverage. She slammed it into the man's midsection, knocking the wind out of him. He staggered back, clutching his side. She didn't waste a moment. Margaret darted to the window and yanked it open, rain still pouring outside. She was about to climb out when the man's hand clamped around her ankle, dragging her back in. "Not so fast," he growled, his voice laced with venom. Margaret twisted, kicking him hard in the face. He fell back, dazed, but still not out. She couldn't keep this up. He was stronger, better trained. And then she remembered the red thread. With a burst of desperation, she reached into her pocket, pulling out the spool of blood-red thread the web had sent her. The man lunged again, but this time Margaret was ready. She looped the thread around his waist, pulling tight. He froze, his eyes widening as if the thread burned him. For a split second, he looked terrified, like he knew what the thread was. Margaret yanked harder, twisting the thread in a way she'd only seen in her dreams. The man's wrist snapped. He screamed in agony, dropping to the floor. In a blind rage, he tried to reach for her, but Margaret moved faster. She used the thread to trap his arms, immobilizing him. Panting, she stood over him, her hands shaking. "Who sent you?" The man glared up at her, blood trickling from his nose. "You're already dead. The web, they don't let anyone go." Margaret's stomach twisted. "Then why am I still alive?" Before he could answer, she heard sirens in the distance. She had seconds to make a decision. Stay and face the police, or run. Without hesitation, she bolted for the window, sliding out into the rain-soaked alley. The sirens grew louder as she sprinted into the night, her heart hammering in her chest. The web had sent a killer, and she had barely survived. But there was one thing she knew for sure. If she wanted to survive this, she had to strike first. Margaret spent the next hour weaving through London's narrow streets, avoiding the police and whoever else the web might send. She needed answers, more than ever. As dawn broke, Margaret found herself in front of an old bookshop, one she hadn't visited in years. The owner, Mrs. Langley, had been a friend of her grandmother, a woman who knew more about hidden history and secret societies than anyone Margaret had ever met. She knocked on the door, glancing over her shoulder. No one had followed her. After a few moments, Mrs. Langley opened the door, her grey eyes widening in surprise. "Margaret, is everything all right?" Margaret didn't answer. She shoved her way inside, closing the door behind her. "I need your help. I need to know about the web." Mrs. Langley froze, her face paling. "The web?" She answered the name like it was something cursed. "Margaret, you shouldn't even say that name." "I don't have a choice," Margaret said, pulling out the blood-red thread. "They're coming for me." Mrs. Langley stared at the thread, her expression growing darker. "Oh, Margaret, you've been marked." "What does that mean?" Margaret demanded, her voice rising in panic. Mrs. Langley didn't answer right away. She turned and shuffled to the back of the store, pulling out a dusty leather-bound book. When she opened it, Margaret saw the intricate drawings, patterns, symbols, codes, all hidden within crochet work. "The web is more than just a group of criminals," Mrs. Langley said quietly. "They're weavers, masters of deception, hiding the world's darkest secrets in plain sight. Once you're marked with a thread, there's no escape." Margaret swallowed hard. "Then I'll have to unravel them before they unravel me." Mrs. Langley looked at her, her eyes full of pity. "Be careful, Margaret. You're about to pull on a thread that could unravel everything." Margaret nodded, determination still in her. The web had made a mistake by coming after her. Now she was going to find out who the weaver was, and cut their thread for good.
Well, I hope you enjoyed chapter 2. Be looking out for the next one very soon if it's not out already. And like I said before, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Also hit that like button. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comment section how you feel about the series and what you think is going to happen next. All right. See you guys later. Adios.